From the Ticats Audio Network, this is the Ticats This Week with RJ Broadhead and Luke Tasker.
3 games remain in the regular season for the Hamilton Tiger Cats, and they're on their last trip out west, visiting Calgary. Welcome to Ticats This Week. I'm RJ Broadhead. He's Luke Tasker. Ticats, 5 wins, 10 losses. Calgary, 10 wins, 5 losses. So the inverse. And, of course, the Stampeders have had a pretty good season. They're right near the top in a lot of statistics for the Tiger Cats. Luke, in their 5 wins, they've trailed at some point in all of those victories. 4 of those 5 wins have been within 7 points. Nothing, it seems, has come easy for the Tiger Cats, but they still have a chance at the playoffs. It's crazy, isn't it?
It is. And amazingly, the most secure win that they had was, of course, against Winnipeg, like of all things.
And that was slipping at times.
Yeah, even that one. And then they kind of salvaged their fourth quarter there. And that's kind of the thing that stands out about their last 2 wins, Winnipeg and Sask, is what they were able to do in the fourth quarter, in both games, putting together those long drives and sort of holding on and sustaining that at those times in the game when, obviously we've said 1,000 times that was such a big problem for them, in many of their losses this year.
The more good news with the second half, which has been a story, the defense. The Tiger Cats defense shut out Saskatchewan in the second half. First time they've posted a shutout in the second half this season. Outscored the Riders 9-0. So by no means did the Tiger Cats put up a ton of points, but that 0 on the side of Saskatchewan was huge, and it was the second time that the Tiger Cats have won when trailing at halftime. But that second half by the defense, if they can, you can't expect them to get a shutout every second half, but they were phenomenal against Saskatchewan. They have to be carrying some momentum into Calgary, don't they?
Absolutely, and we'll get into the lineup, I'm sure, as well, and the changes there. But I thought the secondary, are kind of coming into their own, got some turnovers, and then of course, just like you can't expect a shutout in every second half, you can't expect 7 sacks either in every game. But that was certainly a huge part of the Saskatchewan win and what they were able to do to Cody Fajardo. But if that pressure, if they can keep on, at least a strong pass rush, and force opponents to have to make those quick decisions. And that was huge in that Sask game. Really, really a key to that defensive success.
Yeah, well, let's talk about the sacks because you brought it up, Luke, and it's definitely a topic. 7 sacks against Saskatchewan. Malik Carney with the hat trick of sacks. You look at the defense. Simone Lawrence is back. He's missed the last 6 games. He'll be back. So the defense is pretty close. Really, the only starter missing is Dylan Wynn, and that is a big missing piece. But Ted Laurent steps into the middle there, and Malik Carney stepped up on the end, and we know what Julian Hauser's done. The problem with getting to Jake Mayer and the Stampeders is the Stamps have allowed the fewest quarterback sacks. In fact, there was a great stat. On first down, they've allowed just 3 quarterback sacks all season long. But somehow the Tiger Cats have to find a way to get to him, don't they?
I think so. I think it's unbelievable how much that helps their the secondary when they're applying that kind of pressure, that 7 sack pressure. I mean, it's just huge, and that you're going to be able to play a little bit more aggressive when Cody Fajardo or Jake Mayer, if they're rushing and having to get the ball out of their hand quickly, that secondary can lick their chops a little bit more. You mentioned Dylan Wynn, and maybe one of our favorite players, I think, in
For
our
sure.
booth, I would say, RJ.
Yeah.
And of course, he's missing dearly from the lineup, but the run, not only the pass pressure, but the run defense last week and what they were able to do against that, effectively pretty much eliminating it from Saskatchewan's approach at Tim Hortons Field last week. That combination was deadly. I mean, they had a really impressive game across the board, with the exception of some of those. We saw early on in that second quarter a penalty sort of propel and sort of slingshot what was a Saskatchewan successful drive. And so you have a couple blunders here and there, but statistically it was an unbelievable game. And so that combination, man, if they can force Jake Mayer to force the quick pass, and then also to take away some of that run, man, it's hard to lose a game when your defense plays like that.
with the penalties, Luke, it hasn't happened often where the Tiger Cats have taken more penalty yards than their opponents. It was just the 5th time this season, but they've done it now in back-to-back games. Do you think that's something that's being talked about going into this Calgary game?
Well, and in Montreal, it was, well, more noticeable, of course, from a loss in Montreal with the penalty yards, but it was abysmal. I mean, there was 130-some penalty yards in the Montreal game that was just, it was at bad times. It was compounding. There was back-to-back plays with penalties, and that does come down to a discipline thing. You've got to be really, really careful with that kind of stuff. RJ, I'm as I go through my week and listen to our broadcast, you re-listen to ours.
Yeah,
it's reminding me of the physicality of that Saskatchewan game and the mentality of playoff football that we saw. That leads to those misconduct, unnecessary rough, those types of penalties, which are often 15-yarders, which are really, really game-changing penalties. That comes down to a discipline thing. You've got to be able to reel it in. You've got to be able to swallow the pill there in that moment when you want to retaliate or lash out, and you've got to be able to avoid taking that. I mean, I've said it this way in the booth, RJ, and it kills me with no yards penalties because they're so costly. It's not a 5-yard, it's a 15-yard penalty, and that's different because that's.
Sorry, Luke. I'll let you continue, but I just want to add a little side note. I just wish the listeners could see your reaction on those no yards penalties. You don't.
However,
however
energized I am in the call, I'm even physically, I'm going through even a harder time in the booth. It's a struggle for me. Well, it's just so damaging, and specifically to the no yards. That's not that's an effort penalty. You're trying your hard. You want to make the tackle. You want to get in the right position, and so that's hard to do. And it's damaging, really damaging, that 15 yards. But when you get the misconduct style, roughing the passer, those are controllables, and you've got to be able to pull off that and save that. It falls into Coach O's the realm of controllables and uncontrollables. I grant that sometimes the no yards falls into what is close to an uncontrollable factor, a missed kick that you don't expect from your punter, and so you're too close. And it happens all kinds of ways. But most of those, call them misconduct style, 15-yarders, unsportsmanlike, all that, most of that falls into a category of controllable factors. And a playoff team, if you want to win the East, if you want to get into these playoffs for the Ticats, win the East, win the Grey Cup, you eliminate those.
Absolutely. Hey, Ticats fans, it's time to ride on our strength. And literally, it's time, because today is the last day to purchase 4 eligible Hercules passenger or light truck tires to receive a $100 Ticats rewards card and be entered to win our road trip sweepstakes, available at participating Active Green and Ross Ontario locations, or visit HerculesTires.com/AGR rewards. So if you're listening to this on Thursday, which is when we're chatting, it is currently Thursday, you got to get out and you got to get your Hercules tires. If you're listening on Friday, it's too late. It's too late. We can set you up for the game. You'll have all the information for the game on Friday night, but you can't get into the sweepstakes. So this is it. The time is running out, and it's kind of running out in the CFL season too. It's pretty exciting because the Tiger Cats still have a chance. The Riders still have a chance. Ottawa's still in the mix, and we'll know what happens in that Ottawa-Montreal game prior to our game on Friday, which is now scheduled to start at 9:45-ish with that Montreal-Ottawa game before it. So that'll be interesting. If Montreal wins, Hamilton has no chance for second spot. So basically, there is a tiny little chance for the Tiger Cats to finish second in the East. They'd have to win out. Montreal would have to lose out. So that could be up for grabs. If Ottawa wins, they're right in the thick of things and really sets up 2 exciting games for the Tiger Cats to finish out the season. It's, so many teams are still in it. But one thing that really stands out, Calgary's number 1 in turnover differential. They're plus 20. Tiger Cats are the worst at minus 22. So that's like a 44 turnover swing there. That's crazy when you think about that. But the top 5 teams with the best turnover ratio have all qualified for the playoffs. Montreal, and then the 6th team will be either Saskatchewan, Hamilton, or Ottawa. So it's pretty interesting. We've talked about that stat all year long, and it doesn't lie. The best turnover ratios are all in the playoffs.
You're right. And, I guess you could, if you want to get real technical about it, you could ask correlation or causation. Are the good teams, are they good so they don't turn the ball over, or are they good because they don't turn the ball over? I argue for the latter. I mean, that there's a reason, we saw it's statistically so improbable to win a game after getting a punt blocked, and the Ticats did that, and the punt was blocked deep into their own end. It really goes to show how even more impressive that defensive performance was against Saskatchewan, kind of overcoming. That was a huge error that they had to overcome. And we talked about in the broadcast just how costly all turnovers, specifically a blocked punt, is. That is a dagger of a turnover to make. And the Ticats overcame that. I mean, that's kind of encouraging in one sense, but you're not going to string that kind of thing together very, very frequently. Those teams in the positive turnover ratio in Calgary, that is impressive. Just as really frustrating the Ticats negative 22 turnover is, and they've kind of bounced into the negative low 20s for a couple of weeks now. They've in a sense they've kind of flattened out, but early in the season, you make it almost impossible to win some games with the turnover ratio like that. And on the other side of that ratio, Calgary, you can overcome and it can correct a lot of wrongs if you win a turnover ratio, especially by +2 or more in a game. And they've obviously done that throughout the year, time and again. So huge. I mean, Dane Evans, a lot of that falls on his shoulders. We've talked about already throughout the season, RJ. In my opinion, Dane plays his best when he is going out there and trying and going for touchdowns. We've seen a sort of conservative approach that stalls, and then when that happens, you kind of start forcing things. In a lot of those high turnover games for the Ticats, you got to a place on the scoreboard or at moments in the game where all you could do is force. And if you can go out there and get the ball in playmakers' hands early, I feel Dane gets on streaks where he turns into being somewhat unstoppable.
It was an interesting game for Dane Evans. Wes Hill stole the show, no doubt about it. 25 rushes. Dane only had 24 pass attempts. Only completed 11 of those, threw a couple interceptions, didn't throw a touchdown, threw for just over 200 yards. And the Tiger Cats offense scored just one touchdown for the second straight game and the fourth time in 5 games. If the Tiger Cats don't beat Saskatchewan, we're probably talking about some of those numbers. But they got away with the victory, and a victory overshadows a lot of maybe not so stellar performances. So it wasn't Dane's best effort, but did it have to be the way Wes Hills was running? And are you concerned that they seem to only be getting one touchdown a game?
A little bit I am, but I will say this. Midpoint of the season, you either had good quarterback play or you lost. And not to say that Dane's game was bad. Like you said, it wasn't a horrible game. In fact, and I thought he played well in Montreal, and they lost. So I think the team is maybe progressing to a point the Ticats are where it's not so dependent on Dane. It's almost like you can just kind of operate. You can manage some dry spells of offense if you're not turning the ball over at least. But similar to turning the ball over too much, those 15-yard penalties, you can't expect a win on one touchdown very, very often. It's not going to happen. That was the first time all season they'd won with less than 19 points, and that's kind of uncommon in the CFL. The Ticats hadn't done it yet, and now they've got that. I guess I want to expound on the inverse of that, though. There is something encouraging about that. They are finding different ways to win. Whereas, like I said, early in the season, it was great game by your quarterback or a loss, right? And all of a sudden, they have a running back with over 100 yards. They've got an unbelievable pass rush, overcome the block punt. Maybe a more well-rounded team we're seeing as you get into the playoffs, and good timing.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see this receiving core. Anthony Johnson stepped up back in the lineup. He led the team in receiving yards. Stephen Dunbar will be back. Tim White got to 1,000 yards receiving. So a little more experience in there with Stephen Dunbar coming back and Anthony Johnson coming off a big game. Are you expecting more of a passing game, or does it depend on it seemed like, hey, until you can stop Wes Hills, we're going to run him. Is that maybe going to be the game plan going into Calgary too?
I asked Coach O earlier this week in the Coach O show how they went into that game with Wes Hills. Were they expecting to give him that many carries and to see him potentially break 100 yards, or was that a reactive thing to all of a sudden they were having a lot of success and Sask wasn't stopping the run, and so then they piled on the run game? His answer was, they were looking to get Wes Hills more than 10 carries. And sometimes a running back, I think, especially in the CFL, you want to get that 6 yards, 7 yards on first down, but they haven't ran the ball very much, for 2 quarters. Right. I think with Wes Hills, I think they're going to give him a chance early and often and try to get some production on that. And it certainly helps out Dane and the receivers too, when you do get that kind of production.
Absolutely. One thing I didn't pay as much attention to as I probably should have in the game, but I'm going to in Friday's game against Calgary. Jamal Roll and Cariel Brooks, they're so good on that side. Neither one of them had a tackle. So my assumption there is they weren't targeted a lot. Maybe Saskatchewan showed them a ton of respect. Yeah,
you think so? I mean, that's tough. We when Delvin Breaux was with the Ticats, he was having a sort of a quiet statistical year. And everybody knew it's because nobody's throwing the ball at him. Because when Delvin was in the prime of his career, he was an NFL cornerback, and it was really, really hard man coverage or out there on an island with him to get a receiver open. So certainly that can happen. It's a good call though. It's a good thing to pay attention to, and I mean Jamal Roll has been impressive for his career, but he's made plays all over the place. And you can also argue this, RJ, that it's hard for those guys to make tackle when Tunde Adeleke is right over top of the ball every time a receiver catches it.
Yeah, Tunde's so fast. He seems to be in on every play and closes the gap really quick. We talked about the offense, only 1 touchdown. Seth Small was great. So, again, he's putting up points. He went 4 for 4. He's hit his last 9 field goals. So he's on a nice run again. We'll see what the weather will be in Calgary. I looked earlier. It looks like it's going to be actually pretty nice evening where it's going to be in the high teens Celsius. I know you probably know all about Celsius now.
But 20 is 68, 30 is 86, 10 is 50. I got the whole thing memorized. Don't worry.
You've had to. So Calgary's in the playoffs for a 17th straight season. The franchise is really impressive. 14 straight seasons above 500. That includes this season. And Hamilton has not been good in Calgary. 15 straight losses. They haven't won in Calgary since 2004 when Danny McManus, who was just honored on the Wall of Honor, was their quarterback. So you never won in Calgary.
I was 13 years old, RJ. No, not a chance. I was 13 years old, RJ. I couldn't spell CFL.
Well, Tiger Cats are 0-7 on the road this year. And I looked through, I went up to about 1995, and no team has qualified for the playoffs with 0 wins on the road in the regular season. So maybe it happened way down when the American teams were in or way in the early days, but certainly since the mid-90s, our team winless on the road has not qualified for the playoffs. Wow. The Tiger Cats have lost 15 straight in Calgary. Luke, give me a reason to be optimistic as a Tiger Cats fan going into this game.
Well, I lived these experiences because even when my first year in 2013, that was still a long time since they had won in Calgary. You know what I mean? Like there was already a story. It was a storyline for my entire career. We had plenty of games where there's no magic about it. It's just any other football game. And here's the problem is that you start to believe that stuff. And you get there, and all of a sudden the game's really close in the third quarter, and it's like, oh, we actually could win this game. I didn't realize. There's nothing different about it. It's the same. It's the same field. It's all that. They've got a great. I mean, that's really interesting. They've just been a strong franchise for 20 years.
Yes.
Like they just consistently have a winning franchise there. They've always had really great Canadian play in Calgary, and that starts to compound on itself because guys get to points in their career where they're free agents and they say, okay, well, I want to go to Calgary and win a Grey Cup, and that starts to really carry weight. And so that's just been the history that they've had. And so tough place to play, yes, but so is Sask, so is Winnipeg, so is Edmonton, so is Montreal. It's just, it's hard to go on the road in the CFL, but there's nothing magical about Calgary. I remembered games where, we were neck and neck in the fourth quarter going down. I scored a late touchdown in Calgary once in the fourth quarter that I remember about, and we ended up again losing it, obviously. But it was you almost realize how kind of silly it is at some points in those games. And then of course 60-3 was the score of the game in Calgary in 2017, which 61-3, which put us to 0, and I think at that point the season 0-6 or something. And that was different teams, but that sort of was, it's an example. We knew that was a hard place to play, and we were a bad football team at the time. So, these guys have to realize that they're in a sense, reinvented from what was earlier this season. They are playing much better and much more well-rounded. And that's kind of what I mean by this Sask game. They won in a different way than they won the other 4 games this year. When they beat Sask at home, it looked a little bit different as far as run game and the pass rush, overcoming some of the penalties that early in the season kind of killed the games, right? Like they started making mistakes and couldn't stop. They overcame that stuff, so they're different. They'll be able to go out there and handle some of the adversity and make a change if things start going wrong. In line with winning on the road when you from behind, coming back on the road, that's a whole nother thing. They've got to get out there and put some points up in the first half.
Yeah, I'm excited for it because Calgary, they still have a lot to play for. They want to host a playoff game, so they're battling with BC. They played the same amount of games, have the same amount of points as the Lions, so that could come right down to the final couple of games. So Calgary won't be resting players, but the Tiger Cats are the healthiest they've been in a long time. We talked about the defense. Simone's back, so the linebacking core is the one that they had penciled in at the start of the season. The secondary, same thing. Dylan Wynn missing on the defensive line, but we've seen Malik Carney step up. Ted Laurent will step into that middle spot, and then Stephen Dunbar's back. Tim White's had a great year. Anthony Johnson's emerging, and he could be a star in the CFL. So Dane's going to have some options, and with Lamar Durant and Keandre Smith there as well, and Wes Hills is playing great, and the offensive line is invisible, so to speak. You don't talk about it unless sacks are being allowed and you can't run the ball. So the offensive line will be the same one they've had for the last few games. There's a lot of things to like for the Tiger Cats, and I think they're taking their pretty close to their best possible team to Calgary in what should be a playoff game. Would you agree with that?
I do, and after all the quarterback injuries and back and forths, you've got Dane and Matt Schultz backing him up.
Yes,
it's kind of right where you wanted to be at the in October as you get into these meaningful games. And I think, RJ, one of the interesting things here is how impactful the West is becoming on the Eastern playoffs. Obviously, with the threat of a crossover, but so Sask might as well be an East team by now. We've known that since last week.
Yep.
But with Hamilton against Calgary, then Sask will play Calgary twice after their bye week to end the season. And so Calgary is really interesting in how this is going to shape up as well. If Hamilton can beat Calgary, Calgary will continue to have to really work to have a home game in the playoffs, which will make them play Sask better, which makes Sask's opponents, the whole thing is every game, just like last week, Hamilton, by winning that game, keeps all the power in their own hands as far as their fate, and win out and you're in. But by winning this game, they gain more power back into their grasp by making Sask's road even more difficult.
Yeah, I didn't even think of that, Luke. That is a magnificent point. That then Calgary is desperate to win those last 2 games. So
right.
Not only the Tiger Cats get a win, but it makes it tougher on the Riders. I love it. You could win a trip to the Ticats October 29th, away game in Ottawa with Journey Rewards. That's the final road game. So this game in Calgary is the second last. You could win this trip to Ottawa with Journey Rewards. Simply hit ticats.ca/Journey Rewards to enter to win 2 tickets on Via Rail, hotel and game tickets, plus a chance at other prizes, including an autographed Ticats jersey, $250 gift card to the Ticats shop. So go on the road with the Ticats to Ottawa with Journey Rewards. Again, it's ticats.ca Ticats.ca/journey-rewards. So that final game against Ottawa is shaping up to be, it could be quite important. I just want to go through the scenario. So we know if the Tiger Cats win out, they're going to make the playoffs. If they win their final 3 games, the Riders can match them in points. Doesn't matter because the tie goes to the East Division team and Ottawa can't catch them. So that's the easy way. If the Riders win one of their games, then the Tiger Cats need to win 2 of their last 3 games. So a loss in Calgary basically is not the end of the world for the Tiger Cats. It will make things way, way easier, but there's still hope going into Calgary. And if a 16th straight loss happens, then Tiger Cats are still alive.
Yeah, interestingly, they are. So maybe this is your next question coming, but guys, technically this is not a must
Take
win.
it.
Yeah, but
I know. Can you believe it? 3 games left, and I haven't gotten you to say must win yet.
I know. The and that's the interesting thing about the CFL is just that we're still going. Everyone they've still got a chance, even regardless of what happens. But just like last week, I mean, if the Ticats would have lost the game in Sask, we're looking at the last 3 games desperately here, and it's not quite that. And if they are able to get this win in Calgary, and just mathematically, that puts them in a really good position. But emotionally, to go break the losing streak in Calgary, just like they beat Winnipeg. You know, Winnipeg, who was so hot when they came into Tim Hortons Field. To beat them and what that does for the morale, if you go out to Calgary and beat this, Hamilton is looking like an entirely different team as they enter the playoffs than anyone could have expected. Yeah,
really. You throw the first 14 games out, and those last 4 games turn into the most important. Then you're in the playoffs, and who knows what can happen. There's been so much to talk about. It's always been exciting. It's a 5-10 record for the Tiger Cats, 10-5 for the Stampeders. Both teams want the win. They need the win. Tiger Cats need it to continue their pursuit of the playoffs, and the Stampeders need it to continue to stay in the hunt for a home playoff game. And the kickoff scheduled for 9:30, might be 9:45, but we will be there. We'll have it for you on the Ticats Audio Network. And again, Luke, like the previous 15 weeks, cannot wait for this one because there's a lot on the line.
Very excited, RJ, and it'll be a great game, I'm sure. And everybody, just like last week, we're going to see some energy and some physicality, I think.
Well, hope you can join us on the Ticats Audio Network. Might be a bit of a late night, but that's okay. It's Friday. Most of you'll be off Saturday or can work tired on Saturday, and maybe it'll be a Tiger Cats victory. So thanks for tuning into Ticats this week, and we'll chat to you at the game on Friday against the Stampeders. Tiger Cats in Calgary, and it's a 9:30 Eastern time start.
It's been another busy week for your Hamilton Tiger Cats. Luke Tasker and RJ Broadhead have covered it all, and now we would like to hear from you. Email us anytime at gameday@ticats.ca. Subscribe to the Ticats Audio Network on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts.